This week, we look back over the spring series. There's something really very weird, something really very wonderful, and something that ought to be a gog. Plus, there's an extensive report on the Perth Scottish Rally. Back in February, I tested the Mondeo, Ford's replacement for the Sierra and their answer to the Japanese onslaught. It's reasonably priced, capable of respectable fuel consumption, and performance is acceptable. It's like I said at the time. So what we have here is a car that's average. A car that does everything you could reasonably expect of it, averagely. If it was food, it would be a potato. Now in the past, Ford would have been content to stop right there and give this average car to their brilliant marketing department and tell them to get on with it. But you just can't do that anymore because you and I can spot an average car at 60 paces and will simply buy something else. This is why the Mondeo goes further. Much further. One of the options offered is traction control, so starts like that will not be on the cards. And traction control is just one of a huge list of safety features, which should make this one of the safest cars on the road. The doors get side impact beams and most models have anti-lock brakes, but best of all of them have an airbag as standard. Well, since then, and perhaps because of the safety features, 100,000 Mondeos have rolled off the production line. And already, even though diesel, estate and performance versions have not been available, it's the 5th best-selling car in Britain. Early spring brought the much-anticipated arrival of Vauxhall's Corsa, another car with more safety features than Lynn Folds Wood's kitchen. Chris Coffey tested it in Spain.
This will be the major seller when Corsa launches, the 1.4 LS. Not an inspiring car, but quite capable. Ride is much improved than it needed to be. Excellent driving position in the Corsa. It's very much better than the Nova used to be. The pedals were offset to one side, so you drove in a rather crooked position that became very uncomfortable. This is straight ahead and much better for it. Classically simple instrument layout and all the controls at your fingertips. However, I wasn't impressed with the quality of the gear change, too rubbery and imprecise for my taste. While the GSI holds the road well, the 5-door was less impressive. It pitched and wallowed a bit on rough Spanish road surfaces.
Chris mentioned at the time that the Corsa faced 2 main hurdles, a bevy of seriously good rivals and its predecessor's dowdy image. Well, sales are up, and to my mind at least, that's probably due to the fact that the Corsa has the looks of an angel. Good design pays. So, 1993 so far has given us the Mondeo and the Corsa. They're good, safe, sensible, practical, easy-to-own cars. If they were dogs, which they're not, they'd be Labradors, wouldn't they, Trudy? Yes, you stay there, stay. However, not all cars are designed to be user-friendly. Some are special, exhilarating, frightening even. And there was one in particular that I drove, which, to use the American vernacular, was downright awesome. With the pecs of a Chippendale and the stance of a street fighter, this looks like a supercar of the old school. It's the leather-lined, airbagged, catalytically sound super coupe they call the Vantage. This is a cocktail of quintessential old-world charm and savage power. It's like rugby, ever so English, yet gut-wrenchingly brutal. It is poetic violence. Don't, whatever you do, confuse it with a sports car, though. It's not. If it were ever to appear on Mastermind, its specialist subject would not be country lanes. The steering is just excellent, but it rolls and wallows where a Ferrari would point and squirt. But that said, you can't put 4 people and a brace of suitcases in a Ferrari. You won't find the most opulent interior this side of Balmoral in a Ferrari either. This is what makes the Vantage so special. It's a Rolls-Royce with attitude. Cars and owners with a different sort of attitude can be found in Bordeaux every year, where they gather to take part in a 5-day event for those who share a passion for classic cars and fine wine.
One of the better watering holes on the Claret Classics is S30E16. Their sweet white Sauterne wine is considered by many experts to be the very best wine in the world. This 87 vintage costs £100 a bottle, so it's some consolation for those who got lost this morning that every competitor gets a free glassful. A supposed expert in the field of wine and motoring is my old colleague John Hopwood. John, what do you think of this wine?
It's absolutely superb, as is the rally. And we're going down to the corner shop to buy a bottle in the next half an hour or so.
You've competed on nearly every Claret Classics.
Yes.
What is the appeal of it?
Well, it's a very sociable event and also very, very competitive. It is 5 days of very, very competitive motoring, 5 afternoons of very sociable activity, visiting all the best wine houses and brandy houses in France.
Day one had lived up to expectations in every way, but you can't produce the best wine in the world without a little water. And as the cars prepared to leave Bordeaux again next day, heading for the Charente region and on up to Cognac, preparations were made to beat the elements. Apart from the fact that you can never get one if it's raining, taxis take rain in their stride. But for other less protected individuals, this turned into another bad morning. The Bentley boys, how's it going?
Well, it's damp, Tony, you've probably noticed. In fact, it's actually bordering on wet at the moment.
Has this sort of spoilt your performance today at all?
No, that performance is a total what's it without the rain. The rain's actually keeping us cool.
And your wife's driving another Bentley. I mean, she's beating you, presumably.
Oh, God, Mason, do you have to mention that? I mean, that is the end, isn't it?
It's been suggested that perhaps we don't see enough women on Top Gear and that I get to drive all the powerful machines. Both sentiments are claptrap.
When they said I was going to have a ride in an open-top Jag, I imagined something svelte and elegant. What I actually got was this brute. Trikes are usually rather tame things with VW Beetle engines, but Tony Carter from Bradford thought a 5.3-litre V12 Jaguar motor would liven the breed up a bit. The result was this, a monster of a trike called Black Velvet. When you're building something so different, you have to use your ingenuity. The front wheels offer Honda. The radiators from nothing more special than an old Hillman Hunter, albeit with a mild restyle. And as for the wing at the back, that's purely for decoration. Oh, and the shades are not opposed. They're essential to protect your eyes from flying debris. Okay, so talk me through it then.
First of all, rear brakes.
Right, okay.
Front brake,
This one?
throttle, accelerator.
That's quite gentle, is it?
Yeah.
Right.
Automatic gearbox, SE gear shift. Ignition, and off we go.
Right, better hop on. Now, as well as knowing how to drive the trike, one must also dress appropriately. This is not a machine to be approached in a short, tight skirt. And you can forget everything your mother ever taught you about sitting with your back straight and your knees together. It's not the most elegant of positions, but it's an awful lot of fun to drive. Handling isn't too bad in a straight line, but turning corners is to be avoided at all costs, particularly if you're as puny as I am. But Tony assured me 130 is possible in second gear, though I only managed a pathetic 40.
See, I don't get all the Jags, although it's true, I did get to drive this one, the new XJ12. At tickover in the old XJ12, the engine was completely inaudible. But in this one, there's a rumble and, dare I say it, even a slight vibration. The reason is simple. While the basic architecture of the engine in this car is the same as the old one, it's a whole lot more powerful. It's been enlarged from 5.3 to 6 litres, so that it now pumps out a whopping 318 horsepower.
Riders on the storm.
0 to 60 now takes 6.8 seconds, top speed 155 miles an hour. The old XJ12 was all smoothness and serenity, but this one gives you a bit more stuff.
Like a dog without a bone and actor out of riders on the storm.
To get the most out of this car, you need to put the new 4-speed gearbox into its sport mode, put your foot down, and hang on. The engine doesn't hum like it did in the old car, it roars and snarls and growls like it's angry.
Let your children play.
Okay, so it swallows a gallon of fuel every 15 miles or so, but remember, it's a V12. Ultimate status symbols never come cheap. I mean, you can keep a pet cat for what, 100 quid a year? A pet lion, though, that's a different story. And it not only goes and drinks like a big cat, it handles like one too. They've beefed up the steering, fitted square-shouldered, low-profile tyres and huge, fat alloy wheels. This isn't a limo, it's a sports car. It's thoroughly, thoroughly, thoroughly good fun to drive.
Come on, baby, light my fire. Come on, baby, light my fire.
And you don't have to take my word for how good Jags are. Stunt driver Norman Barber always uses one if he's likely to take a knock.
Success! The record of 12 flaming dominoes had been broken, but it wasn't all plain sailing. Norman hadn't hit the first cars in the way he wanted. By the 6th and 7th, he was slowing and the cars were starting to pile up on top. His worst nightmare. Thankfully, by steering from side to side, he managed to pick up speed and the battered Jaguar staggered to the end. There was more relief than usual inside the car as the record tumbled.
One vehicle which Mr. Barber is extremely unlikely to use for that stunt is the Mini Moke, which, thanks to a production line in Portugal, is once again available in Britain. Driving the Moke was and is noisy, bouncy, uncomfortable, drafty, and though it's sprightly and fairly nimble, it's not exactly overflowing with safety features like an airbag or side impact protection beams. It has a 1-litre engine, though there's an injection Cooper version coming later. And if you like driving Minis, and let's face it, who doesn't, you're just going to love this. It's alfresco fun in an anodyne world. I guess by now a great many of you will be wondering when you'll get another chance to see the true classic from the last series. A beast of impeccable breeding, extraordinary bodywork, and it has to be said, breathtaking performance. If anything could be said to be bristling with the appurtenances of gracious living, this is it. Mind you, that's probably because the top of his head at least doesn't really bristle with very much at all.
There are old cars and old cars. Some simply expire, giving up the unequal struggle. They pass the way of all flesh, reduced to their component parts, and are melted down to make new ones. Others, the non-mass-produced variety, better built and more prestigious, are less perishable, less vulnerable to the ravages of time. Their breeding spares them from such an ignominious fate.
But there are a handful that last longer than most. And this little beastie happens to be one of them. No matter what you think about its styling, the Daimler Dart or SP250, to give it its proper title, makes a seriously sensible old car.
What gives the Dart its longevity and high survival rate is its fiberglass body, which means zero rust. There's a massive fourth road bridge chassis and a turbine-like V8 engine capable of up to 30 miles per gallon. In other words, it's as tough as Doc Martens with piffling ownership and restoration costs.
But the main reason for buying a Daimler Dart sounds like this.
The 2.5 V8 Edward Turner designed power unit is the Dart's tour de force and an absolute lulu. If anything, it's too fast for the rest of the car.
You may recall that Count Quentula confessed to owning a Dart. He said he'd never sell it and that he would be buried in it. Which I guess makes a change from the usual car salesman's patter about how he's saving it for his mother. Our Tiff also has a dream car, but because his is Jim Clark's 1962 Lotus 25, it's unlikely he'll get to own it. However, when the new Grand Prix circuit at Donington was opened, Tiff got to realise a lifelong ambition.
Out on the circuit, it is hard to describe my feelings. This is really dreams come true. I am driving Jim Clark's Lotus that I watch with such admiration. Just to be sitting in this car with that yellow stripe, the green bodywork, and this red leather steering wheel evokes so many memories of the past. And I think in my 20 years of motorsport, this is the most amazing car I've driven. Of course, by modern standards, it doesn't have a lot of power. The regulation then was a maximum 1.5 litres, and this V8 Coventry Climax engine that's howling away behind me only produces just under 200 horsepower. So there's nothing like the power of today, but of course there's also nothing like the grip of the today. These skinny, treaded tyres that are bouncing up and down in front of me really have very little grip. So the driver used to slide the car around a lot more. Ooh.
Circuit racing. Now I get the point of that. You can see who's winning, who's coming second, who's last, who's going quickly, and who's not. But there is another type of motorsport where, as a spectator, you are obliged to dress up like man at Millet's and sit around up to your bottom in mud, watching headlights swoop by, spewing gravel in your face. And you've no idea who's winning, the spotty Scottish teenager or the Swedish barrel of laughs. Anyway, I've got the flask, got the sandwiches, so it's time now to take a look at the latest round of the British Rally Championship.
Well, this should confuse Jeremy completely, for this is a racetrack with rally cars on it. In fact, it's the first stage of last weekend's Perth Scottish Rally, the third round of the Mobile 1 Top Gear British Rally Championship. Ah, that's better, a proper rally road. But this short stage at the start of the three-day rally last Friday evening was nearly the undoing of Malcolm Wilson in his Escort. Championship leader Richard Burns claimed Wilson's pace notes were at fault, but Burns himself made a bit of a hash of it. Scotsman Alistair McRae was much more at home in the grounds of Scone Palace, Perth, desperately wanting to win his home event.
50 care, easy left through gate. Into, easy right minus. Okay.
Steve Bennett went off on the first bend of the Pirelli International. Obviously it's habit forming. Next morning the rally headed past Loch Achray towards the west of Scotland and the first forest stage. Wilson, a previous winner of the event, was in confident mood. The Scottish has always been his favourite rally, but the next few minutes might help to make him change his mind. Wilson's bad luck from the 2 earlier rounds had travelled to Scotland. The Escort just ground to a halt. Burns stormed off into Leenach Forest to find the Escort's 300 brake horsepower down to rather slower human power. Although this substantially reduced the pressure on young Richard, he claimed to be genuinely sorry that the promised duel was being decided so early in the day. He could now relax though, knowing his main opposition was teammate Alistair McRae, with David Senior pointing the way forward, passing the stricken Escort on their way. Wilson eventually got out of the stage, but was totally distraught. What went wrong, Malcolm?
I think it's the main shaft in the gearbox, Tony. I just don't know what I've got to do. I really don't. 2 miles into the stage, changed up a gear, no drive. Devastated.
David Llewellyn felt the same on the last round when he was forced out in his Astra and lost his Formula 2 championship lead. In Scotland, the Welshman was back on top. Making a welcome return to the event was the Rest and Be Thankful Hill. First used in 1949, it's now rather potholed. Gwyndaf Evans' time was equalled by Jimmy McRae in another Group N Escort, beating all the faster Group A cars. McRae Jr. was within 5 seconds of Richard Burns, but got into trouble on the 16-mile Glenshelish stage when a split wheel rim let all the air out of a tyre.
Maybe a mile into the long stage, I felt as if the rear offside tyre was going soft. It stayed at its pressure for maybe 3 or 4 miles, but then the tyre just came off the rim. So we had to drive 10 miles with no tyre on, so we've dropped 2.5 minutes. So.
Wouldn't it have been quicker to stop and change it?
No, I don't think it would have been. It would take you maybe 2.5, 3 minutes to change it.
And problems on the same stage for Gwyndaf. A rear puncture which damaged the Escort's suspension. Malcolm Wilson, now charging up the field, caught him to the detriment of his windscreen.
Flat left over dip, flat right long, to care, flat jump 140.
That wily old fox Jimmy McRae, now less active than his illustrious sons, was keeping out of trouble and leading Group N. Richard Burns was now a comfortable 3 minutes ahead of teammate Alistair McRae. Could he now afford to relax and just drive for his biggest win to date? David Llewellyn, displaying the same balance he used in karts, squash and horse riding, was leading the Formula 2 category and lying 5th overall.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
For Gwyndaf Evans, life was about to get hectic. Malcolm Wilson's Group A car has 70 more brake horsepower than the Welshman's much less modified Group N version. With that sort of power difference, Gwyndaf would be keeping a beady eye on his driving mirror if it had any sense. Sure enough, he was soon overhauled. Shortly after this, a track control arm broke and poor Gwyndaf crashed into the scenery and out of the rally. Meanwhile, Malcolm Wilson was notching up fastest times on virtually every stage.
That left over crest.
With Evans out and Wilson's bad start to the day, Ford were now looking towards young Robbie Head to salvage the rally and win Group N. Top privateer Brian Bell was going exceptionally well before a major excursion on the last stage of the day. Well, you've made it to service, Brian. Do you think you'll be able to continue tomorrow?
I don't think so. It looks a little bit too bad of a state.
Yeah. What, the handling?
Yes, it's not quite straight on the handling. I think it would be dangerous to continue.
Although there was snow on the hills, a warm Sunday morning brought out the crowds to the forests north of Perth to see if Saturday's dramas would continue.
The works Subarus seem unstoppable in this championship, and Richard Burns and his secret weapon, co-driver Robert Reed, who lives in these parts, drove beautifully, keeping the 300 brake horsepower well under control to preserve his lead. McRae Sr., 5 times British rally champion, was driving well before a broken joint on the steering put him out of the rally. Chris Birkbeck, in his privately entered Vauxhall, had pushed Llewellyn's works car since the start, but a mechanical failure sidelined him. Although they'd had to change a turbo on their Audi, Johnny Milner and David Orrick were having a good run in 5th place in the Shell Scholarship car. Malcolm Wilson, meanwhile, knew his second Scottish win had eluded him, but his performance was quite mesmerising. From a lowly 41st place, he'd clawed his way back to a position in the top 10 by the middle of Sunday morning. 2 privateers with something to smile about were Kevin Curran in 8th place, and 1 place above him, the happy Australian Paul Dias, who now lives in Lichfield. Peugeot's works entry was in the hands of Paul Franklin. He'd pushed the little 205 up into 6th.
We've started again. It's misfiring, but we've started.
Last stage turbo boost problems dropped Milner down to 9th, but gave him a grandstand seat.
That was Malcolm just going off, getting past us.
But Wilson managed to keep it together to finish 5th. A magnificent drive, but a big disappointment. David Llewellyn and Ian Grinrod had a remarkably trouble-free run to finish 4th overall and win the Formula 2 section in their works Astra. After 2 non-finishes on the trot, we're better than on home ground for a Group N win, and 3rd overall for Scott Robbie Head. Brendan Creeley's consistent driving had amassed enough points for him to lead the Lombard Junior Championship. And there was more.
This is quite a good result. It's just a shopping car, so after 3 rounds now we find ourselves leading Group N overall. We're still leading Formula 2 in the championship as well. So it's been quite a tough event. We've had to fall back on the leaderboard overall a bit to make sure we got our class win, which is the most important. It's been a good event for us.
Although Subaru have yet to win a World Championship rally, they appear to be unbeatable on British soil. And for Richard Burns, a record. The youngest ever driver to achieve a hat-trick of wins on a British Championship at only 22.
We'll be back in the autumn with such attractions as Tony Mason in a tank, a report on the Goodwood Festival of Speed, and of course the London Motor Show and the RAC Rally.